There comes a moment in every life when pain, uninvited and merciless, knocks on the door. Sometimes it arrives suddenly, as if it has been waiting in the shadows, stalking us until the right moment. Other times it creeps in quietly, a subtle weight pressing on our chest until we realize something within us has begun to break. In that instant, everything we once believed about ourselves, our stability, our carefully constructed image, our plans for the future, begins to crumble. It feels as if the very ground beneath our feet vanishes and we are left suspended over an abyss of uncertainty. Yet here lies a truth rarely taught. Pain is not simply an enemy nor an accident of fate. Pain is a messenger. Within suffering hides a strange and transformative truth, one capable of reshaping the course of a human life. If you reflect on your own story, perhaps you'll recall moments that shattered you. A relationship that collapsed despite your efforts, a career suddenly cut short, the loss of a loved one, or even long stretches of solitude where silence became deafening. At the time, these experiences may have seemed unbearable, but later, looking back, you may realize they shaped you more than the moments of ease ever did. It is often through pain that we grow roots deep enough to weather the storms of existence. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist whose work still reverberates through philosophy, therapy, and culture, described this process as individuation. It is the inward journey where one confronts their shadows, faces their fears, and emerges with a self that is more authentic and whole. Pain, he suggested, is the threshold to that journey. This idea is not unique to Jung. Across history, entire civilizations carried similar wisdom. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome spoke of suffering as the training ground of the soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the impediment to action often becomes the very action that transforms us. In the East, the Buddha's first noble truth, life is suffering, was not a call to despair, but an invitation to see suffering as the starting point for awakening. Even indigenous traditions across North America and Africa built rites of passage on discomfort and trial, believing that only by walking through pain could a person earn the wisdom of adulthood. These echoes across time suggest that humanity has always known what modern culture has tried to forget. Pain is not meaningless. It is initiation. Yet in our world today, where comfort is worshipped and pain is medicated, we often flee from suffering as though it were a curse. We are taught to pursue pleasure and escape discomfort at any cost. We turn pain into pathology, something to be silenced rather than understood. And so, when life inevitably delivers loss, rejection, or failure, we are left disoriented, unable to read the message it carries. But imagine for a moment that your pain is not a random cruelty, but a voice emerging from the deepest part of yourself, a voice you may have ignored for too long. It whispers, "Stop, look within, there is something you must see." This is not an easy message to hear, for it demands we confront what we most want to hide. But Jung insisted this confrontation is where transformation begins. Pain strips us bare. It removes the masks we wear to convince ourselves and others that we are in control. It tears down the walls behind which we hide our insecurities, our fears, and our forgotten longings. In this raw state, something extraordinary becomes possible: honesty with ourselves. Pain is often the only force strong enough to shatter the illusions that keep us from our true nature. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." What he meant was simple but radical. Enlightenment is not about bypassing suffering, not about leaping directly into joy, but about turning toward what is most difficult, acknowledging it, and bringing it into the light of awareness. The shadow must be seen before it can be transformed. And here is the paradox. Though pain feels like destruction, it is also creation. The moment we stop resisting it, the moment we listen rather than flee, pain becomes the seed of self-discovery. Just as fire burns away what is unnecessary to reveal pure metal, suffering burns through falsehoods, leaving behind only what is real. Across myth and story, this pattern repeats endlessly. The hero is cast into darkness, whether it is Jonah swallowed by the whale, Odysseus lost at sea, or even modern tales like Frodo carrying the ring into Mordor. These figures endure trial, not because the universe delights in cruelty, but because only through descent into hardship can they rise transformed. Pain is the crucible where the ordinary self is broken open to reveal the extraordinary within. So when pain arrives, as it surely will, the question is not why me, but what is this asking me to see? For within its sharp edges lies a truth that can liberate you. Pain, when faced, becomes not the end of your story, but the beginning of transformation. When faced with suffering, most of us do what comes naturally. We run. Few people, when pain grips them, pause long enough to ask what it means. Instead, we bury ourselves in work. We scroll endlessly through glowing screens. We drown our silence with noise, parties, music, shopping, substances. Anything to mute the inner ache. This instinct is human. It is survival. But Jung observed that avoiding pain never dissolves it. On the contrary, it allows suffering to return again and again in different forms, like a lesson we refuse to learn. Think of the endless cycle many fall into. A broken relationship followed by another that feels eerily similar, quitting a job only to find the same frustrations in the next one, leaving a town only to encounter the same loneliness somewhere new. It can feel like fate conspiring against us, but Jung saw it differently. He believed that the psyche sends us repeated challenges until we listen to what is hidden beneath them. Ignored pain becomes a teacher with infinite patience. This cycle is not unique to our century. In fact, history itself reflects it. Ancient societies noticed how humans, when avoiding truth, repeat destructive patterns. The Greeks told the story of Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder uphill only for it to tumble back again. At its core, that myth is about the futility of avoiding inner reckoning. Until one confronts the truth of one's own existence, life feels like repetition without progress. Our modern distractions only amplify this. Consider the digital world. We carry tiny rectangles of glass and light that promise escape at any moment. The moment loneliness stirs, we open a feed. The instant fear whispers, we drown it in entertainment. But silence, the very thing that could allow the psyche to speak, becomes unbearable. We fill it with noise. We medicate solitude instead of mining it for wisdom. Yet avoidance has consequences. What we refuse to face within ourselves often emerges as conflict outside ourselves. A person repressing anger may find themselves surrounded by aggression. Someone burying their fear of abandonment may sabotage every relationship they enter. What seems like bad luck is often a mirror of an inner wound. Jung argued that suffering ignored grows heavier, while suffering faced begins to lighten. Literature reflects this truth vividly. Dostoevsky's characters are haunted by their inability to confront their own guilt and shadows. Hemingway's heroes, hardened by war, drink and wander, avoiding their wounds until they collapse under them. Their stories remain compelling not only for their artistry, but because they echo our own struggles. When we deny our pain, we do not escape it. We multiply it. Jung proposed an alternative. Imagine that pain itself is a voice, quiet but insistent, speaking from deep within the unconscious. It whispers, "Look here, do not turn away." If you resist, the voice grows louder, reshaping events, pulling you again into similar storms. But if you pause, if you dare to listen, the message begins to emerge. And often that message is simple, yet terrifying. Something in your life must change. To hear it requires courage, for it means standing still in the storm instead of running. It means letting the silence expand until the truth hidden within it becomes undeniable. But silence is where clarity lives. Only by stopping can we notice the subtle patterns, the same arguments, the same disappointments, the same ache wearing different masks. The modern world is built to keep us moving, yet all great transformations begin with stillness. The monks who retreat into the desert, the shamans who fast in forests, the poets who listen for inspiration in solitude, all knew that wisdom does not shout over the noise of distraction. It waits in the quiet. And pain, unwelcome as it is, pushes us toward that quiet by stripping away the illusions that noise can sustain. Jung's insight was that running from suffering chains us to it, while listening to suffering frees us from its grip. The paradox is cruel and beautiful. The only way out of pain is through it. So ask yourself, what hurts in your life right now? And instead of seeking escape, what if you turn toward it? What if the discomfort you are desperate to silence is actually the compass pointing you toward your deepest truth? The cycle will not break by accident. It breaks when you choose to stop running. Beneath the surface of every human life lies a hidden territory, one most of us would rather never enter. Carl Jung called this realm the shadow. It is composed of everything we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge: our fears, our cravings, our secret envy, our unresolved grief, our rage that simmers just out of sight. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is simply the sum of what we hide from ourselves because it does not fit the image we want to project to the world. From childhood, we are trained to polish an acceptable persona, the mask we wear to win approval. We learn to be polite, responsible, strong, cheerful, whatever qualities earn us belonging. But behind this mask, all the impulses that do not conform get pushed into the dark. The child who is told not to cry grows into an adult who hides vulnerability. The teenager shamed for anger grows into someone who denies aggression until it bursts uncontrollably. The shadow grows with each denied truth. The more we ignore it, the more power it gains. Jung warned that what we repress eventually rules us. The shadow surfaces in ways we do not recognize. A sharp word that wounds someone we love, a sudden jealousy that corrodes a friendship, a self-sabotaging decision that ruins an opportunity. It seeps through the cracks of our lives, reminding us that buried emotions never disappear. They wait. Human culture has always carried metaphors for this hidden self. In ancient Greek theater, actors wore masks, persona, to play their roles. Jung borrowed this word to describe our social selves, the masks we wear daily. But the Greeks also told stories of monsters lurking beneath the surface: Medusa, the Minotaur, the Hydra. These were not only external foes, they represented the inner chaos humans feared. Similarly, Christian theology speaks of the battle with temptation, while Buddhist teachings describe the restless monkey mind that pulls us away from truth. Different languages, same reality. Humanity has always known that there is a darker side within. The shadow is not just an individual matter, it lives in societies too. History shows us how nations, unable to face their collective shadows, project them outward. Fear of difference becomes prejudice. Unacknowledged aggression turns into war. The very same principle Jung identified in the psyche repeats at the level of culture. The terrors of the 20th century, the Holocaust, gulags, genocides, were not accidents but eruptions of shadow denied until it consumed millions. On a personal scale, the shadow often shows itself in relationships. Have you ever met someone who, without explanation, brings out the worst in you? Perhaps they make you feel insecure, or they ignite irritation you cannot control. Jung would say this is no coincidence. That person is a mirror, reflecting some hidden part of your own shadow that you have not yet integrated. It is as though life conspires to place before you the very qualities you need to face within yourself. This is why facing the shadow is both terrifying and liberating. It means admitting you are not perfect. It means acknowledging wounds, weaknesses, and longings you would rather forget. Yet Jung insisted that true strength is born in this admission. Only by making the darkness conscious can it be transformed. Consider this. If you deny your anger, it controls you in unconscious bursts. But if you face it, understand it, and accept it as part of your humanity, you can direct that energy into assertiveness, justice, or creativity. If you repress envy, it festers as bitterness. But if you acknowledge it, it can point you toward what you truly desire and motivate you to create it for yourself. Every shadow, when faced, conceals a gift. Across myth, we see this transformation depicted. In the medieval legend of St. George, the knight does not simply flee from the dragon, he confronts it. In modern stories, superheroes like Batman embody the shadow itself, channeling darkness into a force for justice. Even in fairy tales, the villain or monster often holds the treasure once defeated. Symbolically, the shadow guards the gold we seek. Yet confronting the shadow is not a single act, it is a lifelong process. Each new phase of life reveals deeper layers: childhood wounds, adolescent longings, adult disappointments. We peel them back one by one like layers of an onion, and with each confrontation, we grow more whole. This is the paradox Jung revealed. The self you most fear to face is the very self that can liberate you. Ignoring the shadow keeps you fragmented. Integrating it makes you whole. To live authentically, you must carry both your light and your dark, your persona and your shadow, and hold them together without shame. For many, this feels like standing before a locked door in a dark hallway. You are afraid of what might be on the other side, yet you also know that the key to your freedom lies there. Jung's invitation was simple but radical. Dare to open it. One of Jung's most striking insights was the idea of projection. He observed that the qualities we cannot accept in ourselves are often the very ones we notice most strongly in others. The shadow rarely appears to us directly. Instead, it is reflected back through the people we meet. In this sense, every relationship becomes a mirror, and every mirror reveals something we might not want to see. Think of the coworker whose arrogance irritates you, the sibling whose stubbornness drives you mad, or the stranger whose carefree boldness awakens envy you would rather not admit. On the surface, these traits belong to them. Yet Jung would suggest they may also belong to you, unacknowledged, repressed, or waiting to be integrated. What we despise in others often points to what we cannot face in ourselves. This is why certain people seem to trigger us more than others. They may appear like random irritations, but Jung saw them as essential teachers. They reflect the unlived parts of our own psyche. If someone's selfishness enrages you, perhaps you have never allowed yourself to set boundaries or prioritize your needs. If another's ambition feels threatening, perhaps you have denied your own drive for achievement. Life has a way of placing before us exactly the people who reveal our blind spots. Cultures across history have echoed this truth in their own language. In Buddhism, the mind is often compared to a mirror, and others are seen as reflections of our inner state. In Christianity, confession and forgiveness force believers to see in others the very sins they must recognize in themselves. Shakespeare built entire plays on this principle. Think of Othello, where jealousy, once projected onto others, becomes a force of destruction, or Hamlet, where the prince cannot act until he sees his own hesitation mirrored back in the player's performance. At times, projection feels unbearable because it strips away the illusion that our struggles come only from outside. It forces us to admit that what unsettles us in others may also live within us. And yet, this realization is also liberating. For if the source lies within, then so does the power to change. The modern world gives endless opportunities for projection. Scroll through social media and you'll see it everywhere. Judgments, criticisms, envy of curated lives, resentment toward those who appear freer, richer, or happier. Behind every sharp comment may lie an unacknowledged longing, a wish for freedom, beauty, or success that the commenter has not allowed themselves to claim. In this sense, the digital age has amplified what Jung warned about, the unconscious spilling outward, disguised as opinion, but rooted in inner conflict. But projection is not always negative. Sometimes the opposite occurs. We project our hidden strengths onto others. We idolize the artist, the leader, the friend who seems courageous or creative, never realizing that the very qualities we admire are seeds within us. Jung called this the golden shadow, the repressed brilliance of the self waiting for recognition. To see someone's light is often to glimpse your own potential. Understanding projection changes the way we relate to others. Instead of asking, "Why is this person doing this to me?" we might ask, "What is this person showing me about myself?" This shift transforms relationships from battlegrounds into classrooms. Conflicts become invitations to grow, and irritations become signposts pointing inward. Jung believed nothing in life happens by accident. Every encounter, whether joyful or painful, is arranged by the psyche to guide us toward wholeness. The friend who betrays us, the rival who challenges us, the partner who triggers old wounds, all serve a purpose. They force us to see what lies hidden, to confront what we have denied, and to reclaim what we projected. Of course, this does not mean tolerating harm or excusing cruelty. Rather, it means recognizing that even painful encounters can reveal truths about ourselves. For example, a person who repeatedly finds themselves in toxic relationships might discover that the pattern points to their own unhealed fear of abandonment or their reluctance to set boundaries. Once the projection is acknowledged, the cycle can finally break. In myth and story, this law of projection is everywhere. Consider Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection without realizing it was himself. Or think of fairy tales where villains are exaggerated shadows of the hero's own flaws. These stories endure because they echo the structure of human psychology. We meet ourselves everywhere we go, often disguised as someone else. This realization, though uncomfortable, is profoundly hopeful. It means we are never truly powerless. If others are mirrors, then transformation begins not with changing them, but with looking honestly at what they reveal about us. By reclaiming our projections, we step closer to wholeness. So the next time someone unsettles you, ask yourself, what part of me is this person reflecting? What have I pushed into my own shadow that they are now carrying for me? It may be anger, it may be envy, or it may even be brilliance. Whatever it is yours to acknowledge, integrate, and reclaim. This is not easy work. It requires humility, honesty, and courage. But it also offers freedom. The freedom to stop being ruled by unconscious forces and to begin living from conscious choice. Every relationship, then, becomes more than chance. It becomes a message. And every mirror, however painful, holds the possibility of transformation. There is a common belief that suffering is a punishment, a mark of failure, or some cosmic sign that we have done something wrong. But Jung offered a radically different view. Pain is not a sentence. It is a process. He compared it to the ancient practice of alchemy, where crude lead is subjected to fire until it transforms into gold. In the same way, suffering burns away illusions, revealing a deeper self that could not have emerged otherwise. In medieval Europe, alchemy was practiced not only as a chemical experiment, but as a spiritual metaphor. Alchemists spoke of turning base metals into pure ones, but their hidden aim was transformation of the soul. The fire in the furnace represented life's hardships. The gold symbolized wisdom born of trial. Jung saw this symbolism as a perfect mirror for human psychology. Our grief, loss, and struggles are the heat of the furnace, and if we endure it with awareness, we emerge as something more refined, more whole. Think of the myths humanity has told for millennia. The phoenix that burns to ashes, only to rise renewed in radiant fire. The crucifixion that leads to resurrection. Hercules, completing impossible labors to achieve immortality. These are not mere stories. They are blueprints of transformation, reminding us that suffering is not an ending, but a passageway. Even in modern history, we find countless examples. Soldiers returning from war, shattered by trauma, who turn their pain into movements for peace. Artists who channel heartbreak into paintings, novels, and music that heal others. Activists who endure injustice, yet use their wounds to ignite change for generations to come. Pain in these lives did not destroy, it forged. And on a smaller, more intimate scale, every human life carries echoes of this alchemy. Consider a person who loses a job. At first, the loss feels devastating, like a collapse of identity. But in time, it may open the door to a calling that had long been ignored. Or think of someone who endures a broken relationship. Though the heartbreak feels unbearable, it forces them to recognize their worth, to set boundaries, and to love with greater authenticity when love returns. In hindsight, what once seemed unbearable becomes the very ground from which strength grew. This reframing is crucial, for if pain is seen as punishment, we respond with resentment, resistance, or despair. But if pain is understood as transformation, we begin to meet it differently. We stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" In that shift of perspective lies the seed of growth. Jung described this shift as part of individuation, the lifelong journey toward becoming our truest self. Pain is not random. It is the psyche's way of drawing our attention to what must change. Just as the body sends pain signals to protect itself from harm, the psyche sends emotional pain to alert us to wounds within. Ignoring it keeps us stuck. Listening to it moves us forward. There is a story told of the Japanese art of kintsugi. When a bowl breaks, instead of discarding it, artisans mend it with gold, highlighting the cracks instead of hiding them. The repaired bowl becomes more beautiful because of its fractures, not in spite of them. This is precisely how pain works in our lives. Our scars, if acknowledged, become the most luminous parts of us. They tell a story of survival, of resilience, of transformation. Yet transformation through pain is never instant. Fire takes time to purify metal, and the soul requires patience to grow. Often we cannot see the meaning of our suffering while we are still inside it. Only later, in reflection, do we realize what it gave us. That is why Jung urged patience with ourselves. The alchemy of the psyche cannot be rushed. This process is not about denying the reality of pain. To pretend that suffering is easy would be cruel. Grief, heartbreak, and loss cut deeply, and their wounds take time to heal. Jung did not romanticize suffering. He acknowledged its weight. But he also insisted that within that weight lies potential. Pain is heavy because it carries the gold of transformation. The key lies in how we respond. If we run, we remain in cycles of repetition. If we resist, we only deepen the wound. But if we face it, if we allow ourselves to sit with the discomfort, to ask what it is showing us, then suffering becomes a doorway. We begin to see patterns, to uncover truths, and to reclaim parts of ourselves that were long buried. In this way, every challenge becomes an initiation, every loss a threshold, and every scar a mark not of weakness but of strength. Pain, Jung believed, was the soul's way of guiding us toward our most authentic self. It is not the enemy of life, it is the fire that refines it. So the next time hardship comes, perhaps the question is not, "How can I escape this?" but "What is waiting to be born in me through this?" For what feels like destruction may, in truth, be the beginning of creation. Jung once wrote a phrase that has echoed across generations. "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." On the surface, it seems simple, almost poetic. But within those words lies one of the most profound lessons of psychology and human experience. Most of us live our lives looking outward, seeking approval, chasing success, measuring ourselves by the yardsticks of society. We dream of what others might think of us, of how we appear, of the roles we play. Yet Jung insisted that true awakening does not come from outward validation. It comes only when we turn inward, listening to the voice we have long ignored. This is why pain can be such a powerful threshold. It interrupts the outward chase and forces us to pause, to look where we have avoided looking. When the world outside crumbles, we are left with only one place to go, within. Modern psychology has confirmed what Jung intuited a century ago. Practices like therapy, mindfulness, and meditation all hinge on the same principle: awareness of the inner world. Therapy asks us to trace the roots of our patterns, to notice how past wounds shape present choices. Mindfulness teaches us to sit in silence, observing the flow of thought without judgment. Meditation creates the stillness needed to hear the quieter truths of the psyche. Each of these practices is a doorway to what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole. And when we begin to listen inwardly, something remarkable often happens. The outer world seems to shift in response. Jung described this as synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that defy logic but feel like confirmation from the universe. Perhaps you make a difficult decision, and the very next day, a book, a person, or a phrase arrives in your life as if to affirm it. Or perhaps you carry a hidden question in your heart, and the answer appears unexpectedly in conversation or in nature. Jung did not see these as random. He saw them as signs of alignment between inner truth and outer reality. Across cultures, similar wisdom has existed for centuries. The Taoist sages of China spoke of Wu Wei, effortless action that arises when one lives in harmony with the Tao. The mystics of Christianity describe moments when prayer brought them into such union with the divine that events unfolded in almost miraculous order. Indigenous traditions often viewed dreams and signs in nature as guidance from the spirit world. Though the language differs, the pattern is the same. When a person lives authentically from within, the world outside reflects it. This awakening is not about perfection. It does not mean erasing flaws or silencing fear. It means noticing them, understanding them, and integrating them into a larger wholeness. Jung argued that awakening requires us to see the unconscious forces at play in our lives, to drag them into the light of awareness, and to live in conscious relationship with them. In this way, the shadow no longer controls us from the dark. Instead, it becomes part of the tapestry of who we are. Imagine your psyche as a house. For years, you have lived only in the bright rooms, the living room of accomplishments, the kitchen of responsibilities, the porch where you entertain others. But deep inside, there are locked doors, dusty basements, forgotten attics. Awakening means turning the key, entering those spaces, and discovering what has long been hidden. Some rooms will frighten you, filled with shadows and cobwebs, but others will surprise you, containing treasures you had forgotten, dreams, talents, longings waiting to be remembered. This inner work demands courage. It is far easier to stay on the porch of appearances than to venture into the unlit hallways of the self. That is why so many people resist it, distracting themselves endlessly with busyness and noise. Yet Jung's insight was clear. Without this inner exploration, life remains shallow, repetitive, and dreamlike. Awakening requires looking inward, no matter how uncomfortable it feels, and yet there is beauty in this discomfort. For each time we turn inward, each time we confront what we had avoided, we emerge with greater clarity. The noise of the world loses some of its hold. The need for constant approval begins to loosen. We no longer chase the endless mirage of enough defined by others. Instead, we begin to hear a quieter, steadier voice, the voice of authenticity. Jung called this process individuation because it is the work of becoming truly individual, not in the sense of isolation, but in the sense of living from one's own center rather than borrowed expectations. To individuate is to awaken from the dream of other people's approval and to live aligned with the truth of one's soul. This is not easy work. It requires silence in a world that fears silence. It requires honesty in a culture that rewards performance. It requires patience in an age obsessed with speed. But those who commit to it discover something extraordinary. Life begins to feel less like chaos and more like meaning. The patterns of suffering start to make sense. The synchronicities grow more frequent. And gradually, the person who once felt lost in pain begins to feel guided. Awakening, then, is not an abstract idea. It is a lived experience. It is the moment when you realize that the pain you once fled from has become your teacher. It is the realization that the voice you silenced for years is in fact your compass. And it is the dawning awareness that the world outside reflects the world within. To look inside is to wake up, and once awakened, you can never return to the dream. Every culture on earth has told stories of heroes. From the campfires of our ancestors to the cinema screens of today, the narrative is strikingly familiar. The hero is thrust into chaos, faces trials beyond endurance, and emerges transformed. Carl Jung believed this was no coincidence. He saw myth as the language of the unconscious, and he recognized in the hero's journey a mirror of the individuation process, the inner journey each of us is called to undertake. Joseph Campbell, building on Jung's work, famously named this structure the monomyth, or the hero's journey. The pattern is universal. A call to adventure arrives, often through crisis or pain. The hero resists at first, clinging to the familiar. But circumstances force them across a threshold into the unknown. There they face trials, enemies, and inner demons. They suffer, they fail, and they descend into darkness. Yet from this descent comes revelation. The hero discovers hidden strength, acquires wisdom, and finally returns to their world changed, able to bring new life to others. Think of Odysseus, shipwrecked and tested by gods and monsters, who only through suffering learns cunning and endurance. Or Dante, who descends through hell itself before he can glimpse paradise. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest stories, the king confronts death, loses his closest friend, and only through grief learns the humility of being human. Even in modern mythologies, Luke Skywalker leaving Tatooine, Frodo carrying the ring, or Black Panther stepping into the ancestral plane, the structure remains the same. Pain forces transformation. The shadow must be faced. The hero emerges, not the same as before. Jung saw these stories not as mere entertainment, but as reflections of the psyche's deepest truth. Each of us is the hero of our own journey. The monsters we face may not breathe fire, but they may take the form of addiction, grief, betrayal, or fear. The labyrinth may not be made of stone, but it may be the maze of our own conflicting desires. The descent into the underworld may look like depression, heartbreak, or the loss of everything we thought defined us. And the treasure is not gold or glory, but the discovery of our authentic self. The parallels are striking. Just as mythological heroes meet guides along their journey, Merlin to Arthur, Virgil to Dante, Gandalf to Frodo, so too do we encounter mentors, therapists, friends, or even strangers who help us see what we could not see alone. Just as heroes face enemies, so do we confront parts of ourselves that resist change. The fear of failure, the doubt that whispers we are not enough, the comfort of old patterns. And like all heroes, we resist the call. We tell ourselves we are not ready, that the pain is too much, that it would be easier to remain in the familiar even if it suffocates us. Yet life is relentless. It delivers the call again and again until we answer. Jung would say that individuation, the journey toward wholeness, is not optional. The soul insists upon it. There is a reason audiences across centuries and continents never tire of hero stories. They speak to something eternal within us. When we watch a hero endure, we feel our own struggles reflected. When they rise, we sense our own possibility. These stories remind us that we, too, can walk through darkness and emerge into light. But unlike mythic heroes, we do not need to slay dragons or conquer empires. Our quest is inward. The dragon may be the anger we deny, the grief we bury, or the fear we refuse to name. The empire to conquer may be the false identities we wear to please others. The treasure to recover may be the forgotten child within us, longing to be loved as we are. The journey is never easy. There will be nights of despair, moments of collapse, times when we feel utterly alone. In myth, this is the dark night of the soul, the hero's lowest point. Yet paradoxically, it is also the threshold of transformation. For in that darkness, stripped of illusions, we discover the light we carry within. Jung believed that the hero is not an extraordinary figure set apart from the rest of us. The hero is a symbol of the inner self that dares to confront shadow and seek wholeness. Each of us carries this archetype. Each of us has the capacity to answer the call, to endure the trials, and to return changed. And perhaps the most important truth of all, the journey does not end with us. Like every hero who returns with a gift for their community, when we confront our pain and integrate our shadow, we bring more than healing to ourselves. We bring wisdom, compassion, and authenticity to those around us. Our transformation becomes a light that guides others on their path. In this sense, the hero's journey is not only personal, it is collective. Each inner victory ripples outward, shaping families, communities, even cultures. To dare the journey is to take responsibility not only for oneself, but for the world. So when pain calls, when the threshold appears before you, remember this: you are not merely enduring hardship. You are being summoned into your own hero's journey. And though the road is difficult, it leads to a treasure greater than any myth has ever promised: the discovery of who you truly are. There comes a moment in every journey when we must release what no longer serves us. For many, this is the hardest step. Letting go feels like loss, like surrender, like admitting defeat. Yet Jung and countless wisdom traditions remind us that letting go is not abandonment, it is transformation. It is an act of profound self-love. To hold on to what is broken, to cling to identities that suffocate us, is to remain bound to the past. To let go, however, is to create space for something new. It is pruning the dead branches so that fresh blossoms can grow. In this sense, letting go is not weakness, but courage. The courage to trust that life will fill the emptiness with what is meant to be. Nature itself offers us this lesson. The trees of autumn release their leaves, not because they are defeated, but because they know winter is coming. By shedding what no longer nourishes them, they prepare for the renewal of spring. Rivers flow freely because they do not cling to any drop of water. They allow each to pass, trusting the current. The ocean does not resist the tide. It ebbs and flows, surrendering to a rhythm larger than itself. Life, at its core, thrives on release. Across cultures, the wisdom is the same. The Taoist masters of China taught the principle of Wu Wei, effortless action, living in harmony with the flow of the Tao rather than resisting it. In Christianity, surrendering to God is not seen as weakness, but as a trust that divine order is greater than human control. In Stoic philosophy, Epictetus urged acceptance of what is outside our power, for resistance only multiplies suffering. Letting go is not resignation. It is alignment with reality. In our modern lives, however, letting go can feel terrifying. We cling to relationships that wound us because they feel familiar. We hold on to jobs that deplete us because they offer security. We carry identities imposed by others, the strong one, the reliable one, the achiever, because we fear who we might be without them. But every attachment that suffocates us becomes a chain around the soul. Jung insisted that individuation requires breaking those chains, even when it feels like tearing away a part of ourselves. And yet, letting go always opens a door. How many times in life have we clung desperately to something, only to look back later and realize that losing it was the beginning of freedom? The relationship that ended made space for authentic love. The job that collapsed made room for vocation. The identity we released allowed us to live more truthfully. The emptiness we feared became the soil where growth took root. There is a Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with veins of gold. The cracks are not hidden, they are illuminated. The object becomes more beautiful not in spite of its fracture, but because of it. Letting go is similar. It does not erase what was broken, but it honors it while creating a new form. The cracks of our past are filled with wisdom if we allow them to be. Jung also spoke of synchronicity, the meaningful coincidences that occur when we align with our true path. Often these synchronistic events appear only after we release what no longer belongs. It is as though the universe waits for us to clear the space before it sends what we truly need. You let go of one life, and suddenly another begins to assemble itself around you. A person appears, an opportunity opens, a path you had never considered unfolds. What seemed like chance may in fact be life responding to your authenticity. But to reach this point, we must first release control. And this is perhaps the hardest part. We are taught to cling, to fight, to dominate our circumstances. Letting go feels like stepping into uncertainty with empty hands. Yet uncertainty is precisely where transformation lives. Every hero who descends into the underworld must let go of the familiar before they can return renewed. Every soul that awakens must surrender the old before it can embrace the new. Letting go, then, is not the end of the journey, but the gateway to its deepest truth. It is standing before the unknown and saying, I trust that there is meaning here, even if I cannot yet see it. It is daring to believe that the emptiness we fear is in fact the birthplace of wholeness. So ask yourself, what are you still holding on to? What roles, relationships, or beliefs no longer nourish your soul? What part of yourself is ready to be released so that something greater can emerge? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary. For every act of letting go is an act of becoming. When you release what no longer belongs, you send a signal to life itself. I am ready. Ready to grow, ready to transform, ready to awaken. And life, in its mysterious way, responds. At the heart of Jung's vision lies a radical truth. The goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. To be whole is not to be flawless, eternally positive, or untouched by pain. Wholeness means embracing every part of ourselves, the light and the dark, the wounds and the gifts, the persona and the shadow. Only in this embrace do we find authenticity. In our culture, authenticity has become a popular word, yet few grasp its depth. To live authentically is to strip away the masks we wear for approval, the performances we give to appear strong, successful, or lovable. It means daring to reveal who we truly are, even when it risks rejection. Jung insisted that authenticity is the greatest act of courage because it requires us to accept ourselves fully before asking the world to accept us. This acceptance does not mean excusing every flaw or refusing to grow. On the contrary, it means seeing our flaws clearly, acknowledging them without shame, and choosing to live honestly with them. When we stop projecting our shadow onto others, when we integrate it within ourselves, we begin to treat others differently. Judgment softens into compassion, for we recognize that everyone else carries shadows too. The battles they fight are not so different from our own. This shift ripples outward. A person who embraces their own wholeness creates relationships built on truth rather than illusion. They no longer chase external validation, so their connections are rooted in genuine love, not need. They no longer demand perfection from others, so their compassion deepens. In this way, individuation is not selfish. It transforms the collective. History offers glimpses of this transformation on a larger scale. Figures like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Nelson Mandela endured suffering, faced their own shadows of anger and despair, and emerged with a wholeness that inspired millions. They were not perfect men. They were wounded, flawed, human. Yet by integrating their darkness rather than denying it, they discovered a strength and authenticity that lit the path for others. Their lives became living proof of Jung's insight. Wholeness is more powerful than perfection. In our personal lives, this truth is just as vital. How many times have we felt unworthy because we failed to meet society's narrow definitions of success, beauty, or happiness? How many times have we judged ourselves for weakness, forgetting that vulnerability is part of being human? Jung reminds us that the cracks in our being are not signs of failure, but entry points for transformation. To be whole is to be human without apology. This journey is not a quick fix. It does not end with a single breakthrough or a moment of enlightenment. It is a lifelong process, an unfolding, a continual returning to the work of self-discovery. There will be setbacks. There will be days when fear whispers that you are not enough, when old patterns pull you back. But each time you choose honesty over denial, courage over avoidance, authenticity over performance, you take another step toward wholeness. And here lies the paradox. Though this work is deeply personal, it is never only about us. When you choose to live authentically, you give others permission to do the same. When you face your shadows, you break cycles of projection that would otherwise wound your family, your friendships, your community. When you embrace wholeness, you become a quiet but powerful force of healing in a fragmented world. Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." The opposite is also true. What you accept begins to transform. The moment you stop fighting yourself, the moment you welcome even the darkest parts of your being, you reclaim your power. Pain loses its grip, shadows lose their threat, and life begins to flow more freely, more authentically, more fully. So perhaps the question is not, how do I erase my pain? But how can I live with it as my teacher? Not, how do I silence my shadow? But what gift is hidden within it? And not, how do I become perfect? But how can I embrace myself as whole? In the end, the message is simple, though never easy. Life is not about avoiding suffering, but about finding meaning within it. Pain is not your enemy. It is your messenger. The shadow is not your curse. It is your guide. And wholeness is not about transcending humanity. It is about inhabiting it fully. As you walk forward, remember this. You are not broken. You are becoming. Every scar, every wound, every shadow is part of your story, and your story is still unfolding. The work of individuation, the path of authenticity, is the greatest adventure of all, the hero's journey within. And when you live from that place, you will discover what Jung meant all along, that the darkness you feared was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to lead you back to your own light.